Hello, everyone, and welcome to this brand new episode of Ingenious You, and welcome back to Season 6, where I am honored to be in conversation with some of higher education's most extraordinary women leaders. Throughout this season, we've been exploring the journeys, the insights, and the leadership wisdom of women who are shaping the future of our colleges and universities in remarkable ways. My guest today is Dr. Isabelle Cherney, president of Mount Mary University in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Isabelle's story is unlike any other we have featured this season. Born and raised in Switzerland, a developmental psychologist by training, and a passionate advocate for women and children, she brings a global perspective and a deeply human-centered approach to leadership. What resonated most with me during our conversation was a theme that surfaced time and again: the power of seeing the potential in others. Isabelle shared how her own leadership journey was shaped by people who tapped her on the shoulder and encouraged her to pursue opportunities she never would have imagined for herself. Today, as a university president, she has made it her mission to do the same for others. This is a conversation about leadership for sure, but it's also a conversation about courage, possibility, mentorship, and the profound impact we can each have when we help others see strengths they may not yet recognize in themselves. I can't wait for you to get to know Dr. Isabelle Cherney. President Cherney, welcome to the Ingenious You community.
Thank you so much, Melissa.
Now, you have a very interesting background, and I would love for our listeners to learn something about your leadership journey. So tell us where it begins for you.
I think it began when I was a girl. And I grew up in Switzerland. That's my accent. And I grew up in an environment where the neighborhood, we had 42 children on a very small kind of cul-de-sac space. And I was always the one that I guess I taught many, like 10 or 12 students, so to speak, children, and I loved it. It was almost like being Mama Bear, and all these little bears were following me and doing things. And I thought, that is so interesting. But truthfully, I think that although that may have been the first time that I sort of used leadership skill sets, I think it was by accident. I think, like many of us women, maybe, people saw something in me that where they would say, have you ever thought about doing X, Y, or Z? And sometimes really not in my wheelhouse, not something I would have thought. But I'm just going to say one quick story because I think it illustrates who I am and why I'm where I am. And that was, I moved from Switzerland to Omaha, Nebraska. And we had two young boys, and I was kind of bored. I didn't know what to do. Busy, but bored intellectually, I think, at some level. I went to a women's club opportunity, and I showed up, and I still remember this woman comes up to me and she said, "What do you do?" And I said, "Well, I'm raising my boys." And she literally walked away. She didn't engage in any conversation whatsoever. And I remember going home and I'm thinking, I speak 4 or 5 languages. I am not just a housewife. Not that there's anything wrong with being a housewife, and that's what I was at the time. But it just burned in me. Like, I wanted to show this person. I don't know who it was, but in some ways, that was the start of me going back to school and getting my degrees as a non-traditional student, and then things unfolded.
Isn't that interesting? And it's obviously a story that has stayed with you. But it's so interesting how something like that can propel you and did propel you forward in terms of what has been really a remarkable trajectory and career. So thank you for sharing that. Now, you mentioned you grew up in Switzerland. You speak many languages. You have lived and worked across cultures. And I have to say, I've been to Omaha many times. I have relatives there. So I can't even imagine what it must have been like to make that kind of a transition with two small children at that point in your life. But tell me about the global perspective that seems to be just part and parcel of who you are. How has that shaped the way you see leadership?
Very much so. When you speak different languages or you travel, I've traveled through all continents, almost all through, and when you are embedded in that culture, be it for work. I also worked in London for a while and in Switzerland and so forth. You understand the culture from within, and you see and hear and observe that people are all different and yet the same. What I'm saying here is that we're all human beings, and the human dignity really comes out to me. It screams at me that we are all humans on this one planet. But the way that we take care of the planet, the way that we lead, the way that we interact with each other is different. And so I was very keenly aware that I was always different, because now I'm not home anymore, because yes, I live in the United States, but I probably feel more Swiss than I do American. And that's nothing to say about the culture or anything. It is just where you grow up really makes a difference. And so having grown up in a trilingual environment made me even notice in Switzerland the differences between a person from the French speaking part, a person from the German speaking part, or Italian speaking part. We are different, but we're all Swiss. We're all working together to make Switzerland a better place, or whomever we represent. And so what it has done, I think, to me is to be extremely empathetic and compassionate about others, whomever that other person is. And I'm always curious. I'm curious to know, what was their upbringing? Why are they where they are now? Why are they choosing what to do? Thus, the psychology background that I have as well. But the cultural piece, you can't take that away. That is how we interact with each other. And so it certainly, when I think about my leadership style, it is this collaborative sort of leading from behind, because I want to hear what they have to say. And the more diverse the group is, and diversity here is the background. It's not necessarily the color of your skin, but it is, where are you from? What makes you tick? What brings you joy? And then weave that into whatever strategy we need to do.
Sure. Yeah, no, and I can see your psychology background coming through clearly in tandem with your lived experience, which is just beautifully expressed. So I appreciate your giving us that window into who you are. So tell us a little bit more about your academic work that has focused on psychology, on gender and educational pathways, among other things. How how does that academic work inform the way you think about leadership and the way you lead, perhaps?
Thank you. Yes. I was, as I mentioned earlier, I'm just curious about why people do things the way they do it, and why not other things, for example. So when I started my career, it was actually around children's rights. It was about nurturing and self-determination rights for children. And I was curious to see if culture changed the way that children saw whether or not they should have a right. And I did a multicultural study and also looked at it from the adult perspective, etc. But it informed me that, again, culture does matter, but not as much as we think. Not as much as we think. Ultimately, it is the person's well-being within the culture that matters, but maybe not necessarily the character that is there. So, having said that, though, much of my academic research was around gender and memories. So, looking at playing with a toy as a developmental psychologist, I was interested in understanding why boys and girls play differently with the same toy. A boy would quite typically take a doll and use it as a hammer. Well, to me, that is actually really interesting and creative. It's a creative way to use a toy that is typically designed to do something different. The girls would use it as intended. So they would be the nurturers. They would do long sequencing of play, etc. So that drew me into sort of, so what experiences do we have as boys and girls that have long-term effects and impact us? And part of it is the fewer women in STEM at the time when I was doing many of that research. Why do women not go into STEM fields? And part of that reflection is that women or girls have fewer experiences in visual spatial skill set. They don't go outside and necessarily throw a ball. And so what I'm trying to say here is that early experiences really matter for even what kind of career we might expend later on. But what it told me as well is that we're all different. We're all different. So when we think about leadership, it comes with you. Your background, your culture, your way of expression, your character, everything is with that. So it behooves me to really find out who I have next to me, with me, in front of me, in order to be able to lead that person at using their strengths and lifting them up so that they can be empowered to do whatever they need to do.
Wow, that's powerful. That's a powerful way to think about one's potential impact as a leader, I think. So, tell us about your trajectory into the presidency, which is the role that you hold now. Did you ever think you would be a college president? No. So, how did you wind up here?
Yeah, it's not unusual in terms of not that was quite honestly the least likely that I was going to go for. I think in my late career, because I got my PhD when I turned 40.
Uh-huh.
So I'm a young president or a really old president in terms of age, but it was other people seeing something in me and tapped me on my shoulder and said, "Would you be interested in doing this?" And it started from almost like the first month that I was at Creighton University where I started, they needed a new honors program. And this amazing faculty, Ashton Welsh, who passed away, unfortunately, pretty like a year later, would sit in my office and just talk. And then he said, "Would you be interested in being kind of the assistant director to the honors program?" I was barely like knowing where things were. And so I said, sure, why not? I'm going to learn. And so a lot of this is just to illustrate that along the way, there was always somebody who somewhat saw something that I didn't see. I'm really introverted and don't like the limelight. But it was others that would just come and say, "Hey, have you tried this?" Another one with the EDD program was really interesting to me because I got a call and they said, "Oh, we're thinking about creating an EDD program." So at Creighton, that was not a program that existed. I had just won actually a national award for my teaching. And they said, "Well, you could design it and it should be online." And we were not in online. This is early. This is in the 2000s. And so I'm like, wow, I have no idea. I don't do graduate. I don't do online. I don't know anything about leadership. And you're asking me? And I thought about it for 5 seconds and I said, "Okay, I will try. I will try. This sounds amazing. This sounds like something I could learn how to do." So that's been kind of the thing in my life, is that people have been wondering. Fast forward, I went to Merrimack College after that, but at some point somebody called me and said, "There is an opening at Mount Mary University in Wisconsin." I was familiar with Mount Mary because my husband grew up 5 houses down the road from here. And the first time he invited me to meet his parents was literally the first thing I saw was the bell tower of Mount Mary. And I was like, "What is this?" And on top of that, his oldest sister graduated from Mount Mary and was a board member at Mount Mary. And the School Sisters of Notre Dame that sponsor Mount Mary were the sisters that educated my husband. So it was just this full circle.
Yeah.
And it is a women's only undergraduate university. And my research was about women
Yeah.
and how to empower women. And so the person who called me and said she wanted to nominate me was somebody I had hired earlier. And I said, "Well, I was never thinking about this, but let me think about it." And I did apply with absolutely I was not expecting anything to come out of it. And then I kept being asked for another Zoom call and then come here. And the whole time I am just being me. I'm just being who I am. And I'm thinking, if they say yes to who I am, then maybe it's meant to be. Maybe then I can be me in this position. And maybe that is what I'm supposed to do.
Yeah, boy, what a remarkable story. And I actually literally got the goosebumps when you were telling this story because there's just so many serendipitous things that combine to bring you to this place. So, and I'm sure you must feel that. I mean, that must be a part of your calling. And so you've been in the role now for how long?
Almost
Okay. So long enough to have surprises, I'm sure.
surprises every day. It as I was moving up, I want to say up in the administration. It doesn't mean up like somehow better or more powerful or any of that. You're still you. And so you try to do the best you can with what you know. And then I think immediately you don't know much at all. And so not that you feel like an imposter. I don't think I felt that ever. But it is really about learning, and you have to learn really fast, really fast. I mean, everybody comes at you as if you're the wise person. And I've been on here, right? Like, let's say a month. And well, tell me about your vision and what's the strategic plan and how is this going? And so you start to learn to be able to communicate to different stakeholders, I think, in slightly different ways so that they understand. I mean, I almost play being a faculty member again in terms of teaching, in terms of trying to decouple what is it that they don't know yet that I may need to know in order to go back and tell them. So a lot of unlearning in terms of, I think, being in a room and always being present is tiring. Because you might be having a day where you meet with advancement and then you have a student issue and then you have a communication that has to go out and then you have the police that suddenly comes on your premises and then you have deferred maintenance. We live in an old building and then, I knew nothing about deferred maintenance or anything about, water main breaks and what you do. So it is the sheer numbers of things that come at you to be able to stay calm and always open to conversations about things and being vulnerable. I mean, you are who you are. And I found out that in order to get people's trust, so one thing I did is I have been inviting faculty and staff to my house. My husband does a Swiss dinner, beautiful dinners, just to get to know them. And the very first the first team that came, they were waiting for me to ask them for something. And I said, no, there is no quid pro quo of any sorts. This is just to get to know you. And it has really created a community beyond what I would have expected. That has been, beautifully important. But I learn every day and I have a good disposition. I have to say that I don't get angry. I am always calm. To me, a new opportunity opens up when something is happening. So I'm like, we can problem solve this one. And that is a fantastic learning opportunity, as I said, every day, because there's surprises more than we probably would like. I thrive on creative solutions. So that's been one of the beautiful things that I've learned.
Now, you mentioned that you are an introvert. And so I just have to ask you, because the role you're in is a very public role, how do you hold on to your energy? Or how do you sustain yourself? Because I'm a fellow introvert, so I know that requires a different kind of approach when you're in a public type of role. So tell me about how you approach the role and how do you hold on to your energy?
Great question. I think because I see that we are making a difference in people's lives and this transformation transforms me. I'm present. And so the presence helps me to, I think, absorb, connect, and think about whatever it is that is happening right then and there. I'm usually just quiet. I listen. And then at the end, I'm sort of summarizing. This is what I hear. I had to learn to figure out ways to, again, adapt all the time to the circumstance. And I think what sustains me is really being grandma, to be honest. I have 4 grandchildren.
Grandchildren.
I have twins that are 8 years old, a 4-year-old that's coming any minute here
Ah,
to eat with me today, and a 1 month old.
how wonderful. That is truly a blessing. Um,
Yes.
I've had other, interestingly, women talk about this more than men who are presidents, although I don't think it's any less meaningful, but I've had a number of women presidents who are grandmothers say there's nothing like a visit from the grandchild, to just sort of take you to a different place. I wanted to tell you, I interviewed somebody who was 10 years plus in a very successful presidency who has retired now, but very proud of the fact that she's an introvert. She really believed that her introversion helped her to be more effective for all the reasons that you're talking about. But she told the story of when she'd be in a public space and lots of people, lots of activity, she always knew when she had to go take a break. And so she had in the gathering place on her campus, there was a place where she could go and hide. And she said she she had to tee in her she had to make sure her staff knew where to find her because they knew when they couldn't find her that she was getting refueled, and they would go knock on the door and then she'd come back and she was fine. But she learned over time that there were some things she had to do to really retain and keep the energy at a high level. So let me ask you, you have spoken passionately about your vision to advance opportunities for women and children. I'd love to know how that plays out in a practical way now in your role as president.
Yeah. I love that question. So when I came on board and I launched that's sorry, 3 years ago when I had my official inauguration, I announced the creation of an institute for the advancement of women and children. And my vision was really to perpetuate the legacy of the School Sisters of Notre Dame, who are the sisters that sponsor us, whose mission we continue to uphold. And these women have been such a huge influence all over the world, starting thousands of schools everywhere, and including in Wisconsin. But what I needed to do to leave a legacy to whomever, as we continue this mission is we're a women's institution and there's very few left. And how do I keep that just in case this disappears or for some reason we need to admit man, whatever. I'm not making any political or any other comment here. What is it that the school sisters are today, in the past, and will be in the future? So the advancement of women and children has 4 centers of excellence. One is the Center for Women and Children's Rights, because I started in that area, but it's really what they are really famous for is about talking about and doing a lot of work around migration and trafficking, etc., but also against violence against women. And so that's kind of that center. The Center for the Advancement of Women in Technology, which is about let's do technology for good, and especially with AI. And the web was designed by men, so let's make sure that women's voices also come into technology. The Center for Women's Health and Wellness, no brainer. There's a big gap between those who have access to healthcare, those who don't, and also a lot of research has not been done with women in mind. And when women thrive, their families thrive. And that's really what I'm trying to accomplish here. And then the Center for Women's Leadership. Women lead differently, generally speaking, and we have all these women on campus. Let's figure out how to empower them and transform them, because they will transform their families, their neighborhood, and society as a whole going forward.
That's a wonderful legacy. I can see how this must bring you so much meaning, but also it reflects the threads of your life in a very interesting way. You mentioned women do lead differently. Tell me
Mhm.
something about what you've observed in that regard. How do women lead differently?
So I used to teach the psychology of gender, and one of my favorite classes was always about leadership. And I started, and this was again several years ago, always, tell me about leaders. Who is a leader? Why are they leading? And it was they always had men, always men leaders, politically usually affiliated, or sometimes it was a big tech person or somebody. There were very few that found even a person of color or a woman to mention as a leader. And so part of how women lead is they lead more as servant leaders than men do, and it's less transactional. So this is what the research shows. We're more transformational leaders. And companies that have women leaders or board leaders with are more likely to have a workforce that is happier because they tend to address some of the shortcomings, maybe sometimes, childcare or gifts of time or other things that they use to keep and make sure that the employees are happy and fulfilled. So there are differences in the way that women and men lead. And the research tends to say that it's good to have a woman leader, and not just when you close down, because that's also been shown that women get to a leadership position when they have to close down. Sometimes it's an institution, sometimes it's a business, whatever it is, because they're more likely to be kind to the employees.
Boy, that's interesting. Yeah, it's interesting to see what's happening in the world of higher education today. As you know, I'm interviewing only women presidents in this season, and it's some of the common themes very much align with what you have just shared in terms of I guess, what I might call the unique contributions that women make as leaders. So let's bring that down to you, to you as a leader. And you mentioned earlier that you lead from behind. If I were on your campus and I followed you around, what would I see in terms of how your leadership actually plays out in practice? And is there a superpower there that you claim as a leader?
I don't claim a superpower, but people would probably say, what you see is my energy. And what I've been told is that I guess I am a visionary, so I can see where we need to go in 2, 3 years from now. But I can also see through the forest and the trees and how to get there. And so I think that's really helpful. It has been helpful for me, except that's one of the things I had to unlearn, is that not everybody is with me in 3 years down the road. So I have to be in the present and knowing where we might want to go and help people come along that road as we go. So if you were on campus here, you'd see me walk around because I'm no good in here unless I need to recharge, as we talked about. But, it is about going out and I will just go into an office, just say, how are you? How are things going? Can I be helpful in any way? And so that's kind of my way of connecting with everyone, especially the students. We do pizza with the president, and I love those times because I don't teach anymore in a classroom, and I miss that. That is the hardest thing to give up. And so I do it in different ways, and in, again, sort of networking. And it's all about relationships. It's about relating to each other. It's about trusting each other. It's about knowing who is in front of me or whatever. And so it would be, the students know me. They will talk to me. They stop me. And the staff and faculty. So that's how I hear what's going on, because they're not coming necessarily into my door unless, something's really wrong.
How many students do you have there?
We have roughly 1,000.
Yes, that's a wonderful size to
Yes.
to have that relational capacity as a president. Yeah, and for them to get to know you in a way that might
Yes.
not otherwise be possible. Yeah,
Yeah, they often comment about, especially those who transfer in or graduate student, they say, I never knew who the president was.
right.
So it's really nice that, I go to as many things as I can, but I'm not there with my name tag. I actually usually forget to wear it. I'm really there because I just want to be part of whatever the event is.
Sure. Well, and the combination, the way you describe your leadership, is really wonderful. That combination of being able to see ahead and see around the corner, but also see the forest for the trees, so you can figure out how to get to where you are. That's a unique combination, as you know, because it's often either that someone is more futuristic or they're grounded in the weeds, so to speak. But having that dual capacity is really a wonderful strength. So let me ask you about that, because Mount Mary, as you know, has a wonderful mission centered on women's education and social justice, as you've described. And I'm curious, how, as president, do you balance honoring that mission and that legacy while also looking to the future and knowing that you have to adapt that mission in some ways to the changing landscape of higher ed if you're going to survive? So how do you hold those two things? How do you manage that tension, so to speak?
Yeah, and it doesn't need to be a tension. And what I'm saying here is that the mission is so clear to me as a woman
Mhm.
of faith, and I know the school sisters. We have 100 of them on campus here in a building that pray for me every day, by the way, which lifts me up knowing that they are right here. And then the mission gives the guidelines so clearly that I know where we need to go. I think I may be wrong, but I do my best at identifying, first of all, we are here for the students. So whatever is best for the students is what we're going to do. Now, that's not to say that we don't have to be fiscally conservative these days. And you never know, it's quite volatile right now, right? Some things might come in, some things might not come in terms of grants and other things. So I have to obviously be aware of some of those threats that could come upon us. So the way that I have this in my head, and sometimes it's a lot in my head, I have multiple initiatives that I'm thinking this one will be 4 months and we'll work on this. This one will probably take 7 months. This one will take a year. This other one will take 2 years. How do we play together into these initiatives that will then yield what we want to yield? Give you an example. We're the first institution in Wisconsin to have received the okay from our creditor, HLC, to do 3-year programs. Well, that is a tough change. That
Yes.
is something that, faculty don't just go, oh, yes. And, from a budget perspective, is that the best thing to do from a board perspective? So, but I had that idea like 2 years ago. And so as I'm thinking about this, I'm also thinking about how does that work for the students we serve? So I can easily see our students, and some of the students, we have mostly low income students. We're an HSI and an MSI, so women of color at the undergraduate level, and an underrepresented group of all sorts, and a high Pell. How do I make this affordable? My nightmare is I wake up sometimes at night and I'm all sweaty because I'm thinking, here's a woman who needs us and she doesn't know we exist. How do I make sure that we have programs that everyone has access to at an affordable price that will not break the bank? But how do I communicate that to the student body and more so the faculty body, that this is an alternative that might actually be a good thing for the students because they will do whatever it takes for students. And so it's weaving that, I have to constantly inspire or persuade people. There's no power in whatever, the title. It is all about being with the stakeholders and trying to explain why this might be something we need to embrace and see. And if it doesn't work out, we'll reassess, of course. But at this point in time, why don't we make it a more affordable option?
Sure. Yeah. Well, and as you know, the 3-year degree is becoming quite much more common in New England. There are several schools that have, thanks to NETCHI.
Mhm.
NETCHI, as you know, was a pioneer in the accrediting world in terms of putting this forward. So are there any other, as you think to the future, are there any other strategies that you have in mind that you think are going to be particularly critical for the future of your institution?
As I said, I have lots of initiatives ongoing without, I don't want to say too much because
Sure.
I don't want to scare people in terms of, because all of these have to be unwound at
Yeah.
the right time and the right.
Sure.
But I think as higher ed goes, we need to come together. It's been a year, last year particularly, where people were tearing each other apart versus, and competition is just huge.
Yeah.
That doesn't help anyone. That does not help the future high schooler or young adult or older adult to go back to school. We have to be more flexible. We have to find ways to be flexible for the adult learner, myself included, as I was a mom going back and getting my bachelor's and master's and PhD in my 30s. That was all I remember in my 30s, is studying and taking care of the kids. I would have loved to have options. And that we have to just agree to disagree, maybe, but not everybody is the same. Not every institution has to do all of it. So, how do we partner with other institutions who are really good at something? And we might have a different piece, right? We might be really good at healthcare,
Yeah.
but maybe not as good as at theater and music, but that's also something important. So how do we partner with each other without seeing each other as predatory or less than, or, no, can't be. We know this much better than others. Kind of a little bit of that elitist thinking that has creeped up sometimes. So it is to it's to really creatively look at different ways to partner. It could be with the state, it could be with the community, it could be with schools, high schools, and etc.
Yeah, I think that's going to be an increasingly important part of the future, particularly for smaller institutions, because there's just no way we can do it all ourselves anymore. So we just have a few minutes left. Isabel, I want to return to the topic of women's leadership. You have spent so much of your career supporting women's leadership and advancement. I'd love to know what you've learned about what most helps women thrive. Not only what helps them advance and get into careers, and you can speak from personal experience, but when you're in a role, what's most critical to helping you thrive and be successful?
It's such a good question. And here are a few things that I think are really critical. One is women have to feel safe. And what I mean by that is that it's okay to fail. It's okay to take a risk and fail. It's okay to try things. I think too often women have been socialized to be, you don't apply to a job unless you have your checklist and 100% is there. No, men never think that way. They will just go for the job. It looks interesting. I'm going to try. It's okay to try and do that, because women, just by who they are, expand people's presence. And, just because you are here and you're listening, that alone might change the trajectory of the person in front of you. So one is really to go for it. Say yes to opportunities. When a door opens, why not? Try it out. If it doesn't work out, we can always, sometimes back out. I think and be yourself. Women, when I say they need to be safe, it is that it's okay to be you, that your human dignity is good enough. Because we often, women have a lot of stereotypes going with leadership. If you're too confident or come across as confident, you're aggressive. You're too much. If you're not aggressive enough, or if you're not decisive enough, then you're not enough. And so these stereotypes of being too aggressive or not, or weak, really hurt women. And we are sometimes our own worst enemy, and take things personally and attack other women relationally. So we're very much about relations, and it's really the best way is to support, praise talent, and tap women on the shoulder and say, I see something in you. I would like you to try this. I'll be here. I'll be managing. I'll be nurturing. I'll be, scaffolding, but try it. I think you can do this. And then take things off their plate. Don't add things because women tend to belabor everything. They have more of the home front,
Yeah.
generally speaking. And so that it should also be fair and not because they like service, that they do more service, that then they don't have time to really maybe pursue a career that they'd like to try.
What about barriers? What are some of the barriers you see that are still very much there for women?
That belaboring is very much there.
Yeah.
I do see women not saying yes to opportunity because they know they have all these other things that they think they need to do. I'm not saying that they don't. I'm just saying it is still ingrained at the societal level. For sure, the stereotypes about being too confident and but now you're really aggressive. People don't take you seriously. I'm often in meetings, not here because we're mostly women centric, but in other meetings where it's all men. And it's hard to interrupt the men. And it's hard to get especially when you're introverted and you listen and you just like, no, that is not true. I need to say something. It's hard to get into that. And I feel sometimes that labor of trying to make your point is really hard to make around men, as we're talking about the difference maybe between the two.
What gives you hope as you think about women in leadership?
The way that we have come already, just for in my lifetime has been amazing. We're still far from equity, far. But this young generation, my goodness, they feel empowered. They have a voice and they know how to get attention. And I think the younger generation is poised to really take the reins going forward. I'm very enthusiastically endorsing youth today. I think that they need more opportunity and hope that we can give those to those that are here.
And if there's somebody listening, let's say a younger woman who aspires to be a president, let's say she's listening and she's thinking, oh, wow, I would really love to be in that kind of a role someday. Are there some specific things that she should be doing to prepare herself?
I think I will go back to sort of what is it that you want and that is it just a title? What kind of maybe nonprofit you want to be president at to understand what it takes. It is a lot of work and a lot of chaos, I want to say, because every day something new comes in. So start thinking about who you are. What is your strength? What is your superpower? And use that superpower throughout where you go. I would say open up the doors. I mean, if you're courageous enough to actually knock at the door, wow, I was not. But that doesn't mean you can't get there. And surround yourself by sponsors, by other women or men. Sometimes the best sponsors are men that see you thrive and that understand where you want to go. But also mentors, and not just one, multiple ones. Some that, might know you personally, some that know your talent or your skill set or what you want to do. And surround yourself by people you trust and they trust you so that you have that support that you need to say, yes, I will go. I have often been the person that people call and say, should I? Yes, you should. And here's why. So don't take things personally. Go for it. Go for it. It's going to work out because you have a passion for it. You want to do this. This is amazing. I never wanted this, but when you want this, go for it. The courage, the commitment, the compassion that women bring to the plate are unique and we need them.
Indeed. So, last question. I want to ask you to look ahead and tell me what you're at some future point and you're looking back. What is the impact you hope you will have had that will endure into the future?
I hope that I was able to empower everyone not just women, but everyone, to think of themselves as good enough to go forward and do whatever it is that they're passionate about. That there's a little voice there that says, somebody believes in me. I can do that. Kind of like the little train that, I can do it. That I was able to unleash the creativity of people in general. I grew up poor in a rich country, and I always had to think about, how do I do things without money? Not because it was easier, but it made me, I think, more innovative in thinking about solutions. I want people to start being able to do that too. Not because I don't want them to have money. By all means, I want everybody to be well off. But at some level, the frugality really makes you think differently about who you are and the power that you bring to a situation. So to be present, that they feel that they're going to miss somebody at some level. Not that I'm important, but that there was somebody who believed in them for the future.
Isabelle, that's a wonderful note to end on. So thank you so much. I am inspired by our conversation, and I can hardly wait for our listeners to learn about you and your journey, and they too will be inspired. So thank you so much for your time and wisdom and sharing with us today.
Thank you so much for those very thoughtful questions, and I really enjoyed our hour together. Thank you, Melissa.
And that's a wrap on today's IngenioUs episode. A very big thank you for tuning in and sharing this time with us. Don't forget to stay in the loop with our Center for Higher Education Leadership and Innovative Practice, the hub that brings this podcast to life. CHELIP is also behind the free monthly webinars on all things cutting edge in higher ed and offers some terrific certificate programs to boot. Have you checked out our YouTube channel yet? It's where the magic of our top-rated episodes from past seasons comes alive with video interviews. Hit that subscribe button so you're always in the know with our latest and greatest content. Like what you heard? Take a moment to rate and review IngenioUs on your podcast platform of choice. Spread the word to your friends and colleagues and invite them to join our IngenioUs circle. Until next time, keep innovating, keep inspiring, and keep making a difference. Stay safe, stay connected, and above all, stay ingenious.